Season's greetings, happy holidays, happy new year, and welcome to our season in review. Alongside the Director of Athletic Communications, Jeremy Crawford. My name is Matt Menzel. Hard to believe 2022 is just around the corner. It may be here if you're watching this in January, but we recap the year that was in 2021. Certainly another challenging year as we navigate through the pandemic. After what was a wild 2020, essentially no sports between March and the new year. A couple of blue-white games here and there, a couple of hockey games able to get in before the new year, but 2021 was certainly a year that we never could, forsake and foresee. With you look at the scheduling, I mean, it was absolutely crazy when you look at what spring was. But we'll talk about this as we go along. But Jeremy, when you look back at 2021, before we get into the nitty gritty and all the details, what's maybe the first word or first thought that comes to your mind when you think about the year that's been?
I would just say survival. I know we talked about it in the winter going up to it. Like, we knew what that spring was going to somewhat look like, and we're like, oh, we'll be prepared for it. We'll be ready for it. But when that came, it was just day after day after day after day of competition, and it just became survive and live to the next day. I think I looked at the calendar from February till May. We had from February 7th to May, we had 3 off days. We had Valentine's Day off, we had Easter off, and then we somehow had my birthday off where there was a game that a team didn't advance. So we only had 3 days off with no competitions there for that stretch.
And getting to 2021 was challenging because even in 2020, especially in the fall, there was all of this, possibility of could play here, could start here. And obviously, as mentioned, essentially what the fall became was a couple of blue-white inter-squad scrimmages. As mentioned, ACHA hockey got a game in, women's hockey got a game in, but that was it. Otherwise, the rest of the schedule as the months of October and November progressed, wiped off the calendar. Even as of December, the hope was, hey, we're going to start basketball, hockey in January, but even that was a big question mark, and all of a sudden January comes, and schedule are literally popping up a day or two before a scheduled event.
Correct, and we talked about we would set you up like, hey, we might be doing this or that this week, and then like, well, that fell through. We were still trying to figure out how to compete during COVID time, and I think that Angie and Rob and all the staff did a great job of setting us up, and when we got to 2021, where Concordia was in a good place to compete.
Well, it was nice. Basketball finally got their season started in January, early January, and Loris was up first. And I just remember the women's basketball game here inside the John Book Fieldhouse. Just a kind of a surreal, but also a thankful feeling that, hey, sports is back. Limited fans allow, but it certainly was a getting used to again because it had been some times we saw a live, meaningful sporting event on campus.
Well, yeah, it was difficult on many ways. Like, you didn't know how we were going to get through. We had to set up tables differently, and so the crews that typically do the games weren't used to being spread apart, and I know that created some issues there at the very beginning. But like he said, it was kind of a surreal, like, are we doing this? But yet sports are back, because that was the first time we had any sporting, like, head-to-head competition here since acrobatics and tumbling in March.
And what was unique, too, about especially for many of the sports that end up playing in the late winter, early spring, is you didn't play or typically did not play the schools from down in Illinois. It became more of a divisional format around the conference. On top of that, from a basketball standpoint, you played the same team back-to-back days from the same venue.
Correct, and that was still such a unique setting where you really didn't get the home and home. Like, WLC had to come here twice, and those were some great games, and it was great coaching that had to be done where you had to turn around the next day and try to fix what was happening, where in a traditional year you might have 2 weeks till you see that team again.
And you look from a fan standpoint, we were blessed to, have a limited number of fans attend the games here on campus. That wasn't the case universally at some venues. It took a little while before they allowed fans back, so that was some getting used to too, of just trying to create your own energy if you're an athlete, if you're a team. How about hockey? We talk about basketball and having to play back to back. Hockey will get their season started and a great deal of success. I know from the men's standpoint, a lot of fun, a lot of excitement, a lot of meaningful games, especially as February went into March.
Yeah, like, I think it was I think it might have been the regular season St. Scholastica series for the men, where it finally felt like sports were truly back,
Mm-hmm.
where like it was a great student atmosphere, the fans were raucous, and it was a great environment to be in. And I was sitting there and I was like, this finally feels like a sporting event. Like, yes, we had basketball games, but like with some limited attendance, it didn't quite feel like we were all the way back. But then like one of those hockey games, and then the men's hockey team winning their first divisional title, that was just a fun little chapter to cover.
Now, one of the issues you had, throughout these early months of 2021 was you just didn't know if the game was going to be played one week to the next. It could be Monday, Tuesday, and all of a sudden, hey, surprise, some team has COVID all of a sudden. Friday, Saturday, either is wiped off the calendar or you have a new opponent. And so you always had to be on your toes because nothing was concrete and everything was very fluid.
Well, yeah, I'm not gonna drop names, but I know there were some teams that were like, well, Jeremy, this team dropped. They have COVID today. We're working out things to play another school.
Yeah.
And so it's just like that's hard on our office where you have to send schedules to the NCAA. You have to get like programs ready. So just being able to like be on your toes and be like, all right, we're not playing Team A. We're now playing Team B. It's now going to be like an hour later because that team has to drive a little bit. And so that was just difficult on the staff where it was just one full-time staff last year and just trying to rally the kids around getting to point A.
Able to get through basketball, able to get through hockey season, and acrobatics and tumbling they got going. And I know early on, just trying to get an opponent became a challenge thanks to the pandemic. And so they had an inter-squad competition here inside the John Book Fieldhouse. You had men's volleyball. Women's volleyball was moved to the springtime to overcome what was a cancellation of or postponement of the fall. Same thing with football, and we'll get to football in a second. But with volleyball, what was unique, especially on the women's side, was they were playing double headers, conference double headers. So I know the season began with Lakeland. Lakeland was here for not one but two matches with a mini break in between, which that took some getting used to, even though volleyball is used to playing multiple matches in a day, but not to that magnitude.
Not to that magnitude, and especially in the conference and how, with it being divisional, you didn't have many contests. Like, especially with just the few teams that there were, each game really mattered.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, and I think it was the last game because there was some scheduling and balancing where some schools had, like, two more matches than the other. So we're trying to think the mathematics. Like, I had to call the NAC office.
Yeah.
Like, did we clinch the NAC title by winning this? And so every game mattered, and so just being fresh for two matches was key.
That was across the board in all of college athletics, which was unique, is because of the unbalanced schedule with so many teams having to go on pause and resume, and the winning percentages and just the breakdown of how you figure out, okay, who gets to overtake who from a conference standings perspective. But you look at volleyball, and, we talk about things being fluent. We talk about, you just don't know one week to the next. And unfortunately, talking about navigating through the pandemic, for some teams, they had to be at pause at the wrong time. And women's volleyball, one of those teams, unfortunately, a victim, and all of a sudden their season came to a close, didn't get the opportunity to compete in the North Division NAC tournament. But, you talk from an athletic and athlete standpoint, there were some athletes that, no question, they were thankful to get the opportunity to play, but it was a challenging season for them as well because from a testing standpoint, trying to quarantine themselves from others, just trying to, go about being a student athlete, but also trying to stay safe and trying to stay healthy so that they could compete.
Well, not only that, but like let's get like especially the fall student athletes, they're not used to competing in
This
March.
is true,
like,
yeah.
They kind of have their timeline of the year. Like you might have a tougher spring semester because you're in the fall, competing in the fall. So not only were they testing not every morning, but a lot of the mornings they're out there at 7 o'clock. I had to join them spit testing at like some sub-zero temperatures outside. But like they're testing every day. They're being students. And let's be real. The pandemic hit a lot of us mentally hard.
Oh, yeah.
And especially the students. Like, they were pulled from their friends for a year. Like, this has been hard on a lot of student athletes. So just being able to balance all of those things and just being able to compete in the sports they love, I think that's one of the better things that Concordia was able to do this year.
Football is mentioned, one of those sports that end up competing in the springtime. And you're right, you look at a lot of these fall sports, not used to at least competing meaningfully, that's a word, in the springtime, because they do have a spring schedule, and it's a lighter schedule, but it's just more of a spring practice and maybe a scrimmage here and there. But these games count. I mean, this was a conference schedule that counted. It was hard hitting from a football standpoint, and football set out to play a 5-game schedule. Now you look across the conference, and only a couple of teams got through a 5-game schedule. Falcons being one of them, Eureka being the other. And it wasn't, getting from point A to point B. You had to go point C, D, and E to find those 5 games, because I know a couple of teams that had dropped out. You added a non-conference game against Ripon. But bravo to football for finding a way to get to the finish line, playing 5 games. And they had some memorable games, including the battle for the Luther Cup, a 2-point conversion in the closing minute, a gamble taken by head coach Greg Etter, but a gamble that paid off in a victory in that rivalry matchup. The Falcons 1 for 1 so far in 2-point conversions, now trying to take their first lead of the afternoon with 57 seconds remaining. Oh, man. What a gamble. What a gamble. Wide open. Booker able to haul it in. And the gamble pays off. Falcons lead 39-38.
Yeah, that was one of the highlights of the spring. Like, I know we talked about then. Who would have thunk that we would be playing football at Thomas E. Stadium in March? But, like, some of those games and how the Falcons ended the season, that was really like the big wins against Eureka, Ripon, and WLC. You talked about that thrilling 2-point conversion. But being able to finish off that year strong and really move that momentum into the fall, where they really started off strong as well.
In the springtime, outside of men's volleyball having success, they had and I want to bring them up for a second too, because how about the fact they were supposed to have senior night, and all of a sudden, surprise!
Senior night is blue and white.
It became the Josh Dinkelman show. No, but it was an inter-squad matchup, and give men's volleyball credit, because they did a draft where all of a sudden they videotaped it too, where let's have fun, because for the seniors. For those that weren't coming back an extra year, this was their final opportunity to compete inside the John Boog Fieldhouse. And obviously, but a couple of nights before, they find out, guess what? Their opponent cannot compete. So I guess you don't get another opportunity to play inside the John Boog Fieldhouse. But Curtis Madsen and company found a way to make it a meaningful night. I keep using that word meaningful, but that's what it was. That's what 2021 has been all about, meaning and purpose. But they found a way to compete. They had a draft. They had 2 teams go against each other. It was an inter-squad matchup, but it made for a very memorable night.
No, that was one of the highlights of the spring there. Like you said, all of a sudden senior day got pulled out from underneath the seniors, and it was just like, okay, what do you do? Like, they've already, like, this last year's season got pulled out from them, and I thought Coach Madsen did a great job of making that really meaningful night and really going all out for the seniors there. Like, we had the broadcast, that draft, I think they included the ESPN draft music.
They did.
Yeah.
The first pick, Matthew Corman selects James Altoff at outside.
So, like,
and they're going across the bottom of the screen. Who got drafted where?
No, so, like, I thought that was a really fun night, and like you said, that was a great season for them. They got the win in the NAC tournament, and so I thought that was a great way to send out the senior class there.
Now, spring was somewhat normal, if you want to call it that, as far as baseball competing, softball competing, men's and women's lacrosse, track and field, able to return to competition. Obviously, the schedule looked maybe a little bit different, but it was their same timetable.
Well, yeah, it's the same timetable, but a lot of teams weren't able to do traveling. So, like the softballs and baseballs, who typically get like 10 games down south, they weren't able to do that. And so that was one of the more creative days when softball had to move over to Capco.
Well, I forgot about that.
Yeah, because of the
UW Platteville.
Yes, the dirt wasn't fully thawed out there at softball, so that was probably one of the more memorable. You and I know that was one of the more memorable days of 2021. And
wow, I forgot all about that. That's how memorable of a day. Like, there's so much that went into that. It was a challenging day to say the least, with the softball field in the outfield of Capco Park, and they made it work some way somehow, and fans were allowed to kind of sit on the what was essentially the infield turf and kind of watched from the backstop area. You were in our camera shot.
I was just posing in the sweater vest on the sun.
Had to find a way to
keep
the fence up and the picnic tables and all that went into that. And yeah, I don't think we'll ever see that again, but that was certainly a doubleheader to remember against UW Platteville. If I remember correctly, the Falcons got one out of the two.
They did get the
game
second
two,
one.
yep. And so baseball got to compete as well. And you look at from a baseball standpoint, and again, you have the divisional play and the NAC tournament, which is typically here in May, was here to some degree at the North Division portion of the tournament here, and then the winners advanced to play in the South-North all-out best-of-3 tournament, and the Falcons advanced to that and got the opportunity to play here with Aurora playing here in Game 2.
Well, we kind of made the joke at the time. It was just a season that just went quick.
Never ended.
I think we went all the way to like the 23rd of May, and it was just hard. Like, I know it's hard because finals are done, keeping the kids on, keeping the kids fed, and I know the CUW did a good job with that, but with how the format was, it became a 2-weekend format, like you said, the North Division, and then you had the championship series against Aurora, and that was just a long May.
Yeah.
And they credit to the baseball team. They really turned it around. I know I talked to the coaches. They had some pitching issues a little bit in the middle of the year, but then they really figured that out, and then they made it all the way to the championship game.
Well, you talk about the spring, too. We talk about men's and women's lacrosse. How about Fitting Field? I mean, you talk about, John Book Field gets busy all year round. Fitting Field was the place to be in the springtime because, how do I forget, men's and women's soccer also competed in the springtime, and they had a great deal of success, especially, on the women's side, men's side as well. But you had soccer on top of lacrosse, and it was not uncommon to see a triple header on a typical Saturday.
Oh, I should have just set my bed up and downstairs on there, park the Subaru outside, and then just set up there because, like you said, the soccer teams were there in the spring as well, and they both had success. Both the men and women captured North Division titles. So we were just playing all the way through, and it seemed like, it was every day we're out there, and you either had one of the two lacrosses or soccer on.
As I sit here and reflect, and this is really the first time I think I've had the opportunity to sit and kind of reflect on the spring as we kind of rehash what happened. It's kind of a blur, but it's remarkable, and it's a compliment, as you mentioned, to Angie and her crew in athletic training. It's Rob in the athletic department, the student staff, you the fans, the players, the coaches, the discipline that was involved. It's a blur because so much happened in a short amount of time, but it's just remarkable how much did occur to try to get things somewhat back to normal.
Yeah, last night I was going through the calendar and I was just looking through all those games. And as you know, working those games, there's always those little memories that you have. Maybe a national anthem snafu.
Aaron singing the national anthem.
And so, I'm just going through. I was like, that happened that day. That was a mental breakdown day. But, there was, I think it was the last Saturday in March, where at one point, I think softball got rained out, but we were supposed to have something at all of our venues. Baseball field was going, the soccer field was going, softball, football, acro was in the gym, and we had ACHA hockey going. And I was preparing the kids for weeks and weeks, hey, this is our game day. This is what we have. But credit to the student staff, credit to the AT staff. And let's be real, credit to Rob. Rob really pushed that we're going to be playing, we're going to be competing, and we did that.
Well, you bring up a good point because some schools shied away from it, didn't want to take that gamble. And Rob, as long as it was safe to do so, obviously was going to take a risk and sacrifice anybody's health. But as long as it was safe to do so and it made sense, Concordia pushed forward and certainly had a great deal of success in doing so. You bring up ACHA, can't forget about their run to the national tournament, going out to the Dakotas, and they had some nice upset wins during the course of the regular season, which included a win against Iowa State. And Wyatt Wilderman blocked. Gregor looking for a rebound. Wilderman on the backhand. There's a shot. Goal! John Swiatek with 21.9 seconds left in regulation. France, final couple of seconds. That will be it. Falcons pull off the upset.
that Iowa State series, that was fun. There was like you said, going through during that semester, you were tired, I was tired. We're all
Still tired.
We're all still tired. Yeah,
Haven't recovered.
haven't really recovered. But going through, there were some really fun games that we did. I know, talking to wrap up the spring. That weekend where at track and field, I know you were broadcasting for our enemies, but you were.
I was for the knack. I'm just neutral.
Whatever you say. We know who the paycheck came from.
Well,
But just being able to watch the women's track and field team, we heard the game plans for the other schools where they were thinking, oh, this is where the women are going to win. And you and I are just clicking and clacking. You're talking. And just watching the CUW women just get closer and closer and then finally clinch that title. There were some really fun moments in the spring.
oh, no, there's no question about it. And you see behind us, they're getting the graduation set up here for the winter as things, again, another sign, somewhat getting back to normal here inside the John Book Fieldhouse. And you bring up the end of spring, into summer. We lost so many great student athletes that graduated and student workers that graduated. But again, so many people put in so much time and effort to get through the first portion of 2021. And one of the big focuses for you, I know, during the off season, I say off season loosely because let's be honest, I mean, there isn't a true off season, at least not in the last couple of years has there been a true off season with so many moving parts to make sure that safe and ready to return to play. But for you, a big focus was finding a staff, and I know Josh Dinkelman will bring him up. Men's volleyball, part of your staff. Clara Chambers, part of the women's basketball team, have since joined your staff. But that was a challenge for you to try to, at least from an athletic communication standpoint, bring the office back to some normality.
Yeah, last year, I thought, Christmas theme, I really felt like the Grinch just whipping Max. And Max was our students. And we somehow made it up the mountain. And we somehow saved Christmas. And like you said, it was a weird off season where we went later into the spring than we typically did. So, we lost 2 weeks of summer there. And then I kind of zoned out, went off the grid for 2 weeks. Once the final out of that NAC tournament was done, I cried a little, then went to Michigan. And then it's all right, it's time to find a staff. And for about a solid month, I interviewed some candidates. And somehow we ended up with Dinkelman. And let's be real. We take a lot of jokes at Dinkelman, but he's been a great addition to the office. Clara Chambers as well. We're just really doing a good job. We're vibing well, and we're getting a lot of quality content out.
I just want to point out too that typically when somebody cries, the first thing they don't do is go to Michigan. But I digress. Let's talk about the fall, and so you get through the off season, and hey, August comes around. Training camp. What's this? I mean, it's what it was before the pandemic, and that was, I guess, the lovely aspect of the fall is you started to see, even from a scheduling standpoint, things getting kind of back to where they were. The only issue, though, in the fall is, I mean, we're not, and still to this day, not over that pandemic, and so yes, it looked good on paper. But you had a couple of run-ins here with COVID here and there that put a couple of teams or games on pause.
Yeah, coming out of summer, we had the new locker room ceremony, and that, seeing all the guys back in the locker room, that was the first sign of, hey, we're starting to get back to normal. Guys are high-fiving, we're taking pictures, kissing babies, all the good stuff. But, yeah, like you said, there were a few bumps along the way in the fall, but, overall, we kind of got back to a little bit of a normality.
And you had the Hall of Fame induction that was back on and did that outside. You look from a team standpoint, men's and women's soccer competing and awfully competitive. Women's volleyball another competitive year. Football, they had their ups and downs, but they were always competitive. Again, able to get through the fall right into now this winter season.
Correct. And we had some solid fall years. Women's tennis fell a little bit short, but we didn't really mention in the spring, that was one of the more thrilling days when they upset Edgewood in the NAC tournament finals to make it to the NCAA. Women's soccer won the NAC regular season title. Volleyball was right there until the end. Women's tennis was right there till the end. football was really competitive. I know they had some injuries there that kind of bucked the Bronco there a little bit later in the year, but even those games against them, there was some competitive games, especially against Aurora, who was the top seed in the conference.
Triathlon, shooting sports were back and competing. Esports is the one sport that really, throughout this pandemic, finding ways to compete, obviously affected somewhat, but not dramatically by the pandemic, and they continue to make great strides.
They had a great stride. They've had a lot of conference titles this year. Lewis has done a great job with that program, and so young, but they are competitive in so many titles, and they've won a lot of titles this year, and so credit to him, and they keep growing.
And wrestling competing again after they had a great 2021. We look at their winning percentage, their quick start as well, competing as well in the CCIW tournament, a couple of All-Americans. We look right now, okay, so things are, still not normal, but getting closer. I mean, we're not wearing masks at the moment. You look, still games are within question. Men's basketball recently having a game affected by the pandemic. But overall, I mean, you go back to where we were, say, a year ago at this time. Boy, a lot has happened in 12 months, but it's nice and refreshing that here we sit in December, and it's, heading the right direction, or for the most part, it's trending toward what we knew before this pandemic.
Yeah, right now, I think we're sitting in a good space. If there's anything we've learned over the last few months, you can't take anything for granted. Things could change by the end of this interview, but I think we're in the right direction heading forward, and that's our athletic training staff is one of the strongest suits in our entire athletic department. We have so many, and Angie does such a great job with testing and making sure that our athletes are safe, and Rob is putting us in a place where we can safely compete against other schools and getting these student athletes a great opportunity here.
So to wrap it all up, what are you most looking forward to? What we hope will be a relatively quiet yet successful 2022.
I'm really excited for the spring again. I think that we have a lot of teams that could do damage. I think women's tennis is hungry for the NAC tournament. I think softball will be right there again after winning the NAC last year. Baseball, I think, will be in the thick of it. They have some good players coming back. And track and field, lacrosses, I think, across the board, there should be a really strong spring season once everything melts out again. We haven't really had too much snow
Not yet.
But I'm really excited for heading into 2022 for Falcon Athletics.
It has taken a village, but some way, somehow, 2021, bye, see ya, gone. We have gotten through 2021, but no question it'll be a year that even, years down the road, we'll look back at and go, man, that was quite the year for athletics, but a successful year here on the Concordia campus. For Jeremy Crawford and Matt Menzel, thank you for watching our retrospect to 2021. Again, have a very safe and happy holidays. Happy New Year. We'll talk to you again on the Falcon Athletic Network in 2022.